Which is the bigger threat to American democracy and the Constitution? A Vietnamese mother suckling her child, or a white racist governor in Alabama who says, in so many words, to hell with the Constitution and Johnson and everything else? Which is the greater threat to democracy?
This is true. These people have a kind of self-deception. You know, they believe, they circulate these myths so long that they've begun to believe them. And once you believe them, as they say, if you define a situation as being real, it will be real in its consequences. And this is just what's happened. They've come to actually believe this. And any evidence to the contrary, he's the exception. But the fact is, all the people who do struggle hard to accumulate a down payment, they do want something better for themselves and for their kids, and they hope that their neighbors will be the same kind of people that they are.
A black man fights for the white man, not for himself. He tells you to bleed and you bleed. He said, go bleed in Korea for the white man, and you go bleed because you have to. He tells you to go to Vietnam or Lebanon or Laos, and we have to bleed. Then in Mississippi or Alabama or Omaha, Nebraska, where they're taking our rights and we know who the people are who are taking them, we don't have any blood then. We're radical. Just because we want to get the rights that we fight overseas for so the white man can have. We fight over there to defend his women and children and defend his land from attack. And while we're over there fighting for him, our own people are being attacked by the same white people over here we're supposed to be fighting to defend. Right.
In the sepia-toned heart of mid-20th century America, where the air was thick with barbershop powder, the clang of segregation's chains, and the polite lies of liberal civility, a young black man in Omaha began to cut hair, and history.
Few particulars that make Omaha different from New York are just incidental. The problem exists because white people think they're better than black people, and they want to oppress us, and they want us to allow ourselves to be oppressed.
This is the big. I agree with you perfectly. This is the basic problem.
Then what do you
that white people think they're better than others?
I can't solve the problem. You guys pull the strings that close schools. You guys draw the boundaries that keep our kids restricted to the ghetto. You guys write up the restrictive covenants that keep us out of houses. So it's up to you to talk to your brothers and your sisters and persuade them that they have a responsibility. We've assumed ours for over 400 years, and we're tired of this kind of stuff now. We're not going to suffer patiently anymore. No more turning the other cheek. No more blessing our enemies. No more praying for those who despitefully use us. We're going to show you that we've learned the lessons you've taught us. We've studied your history, and you did not take over this country by singing "We Shall Overcome." You did not gain control of the world like you have it now by dealing fairly with a man and keeping your word. You're treaty breakers, you're liars, you're thieves, you rape entire continents and races of people. Then you wonder why these very people don't have any confidence or trust in you.
He was not a preacher, though his words could stir a congregation. Not a scholar, though he mastered reason like a philosopher. He was a barber, and yet, from that modest chair on Spencer Street, he carved out one of the most extraordinary political and moral legacies in American history.
Your religion means nothing. Your law is a farce, and we see it every day. You demonstrated it in Alabama, and I can say you because you're part of the whole system. You profit from it. In fact, you make your living from it. You couldn't walk around and talk to people, stand up in your pulpit on Sunday and preach nice little songs and say, now we're going to give thanks to the Lord for he is good and old Jesus be among us. As far as we're concerned, your Jesus is contaminated, just like everything else you tried to force upon us is contaminated.
He was not a politician yet, nor a celebrity, nor even a man with wealth or formal power, but he had words. And for the black people of North Omaha, hemmed in by red lines and ignored by white politicians, those words had become weapons of survival.
And here's what I'll say, I wish you would follow Jesus like we followed him. Because if you did that, then we'd be in charge tomorrow. I think the problem is so bad that we can have no understanding at all.
You think it's gotten to the point where there can never be that reconciliation?
No. You talk about justice, and it means one thing to you, and we talk about it and it means something else to us. And it'll always be that way. And I'd like you to know I have a terrible feeling against preachers, because I think you guys are the ones who are largely responsible for the problem in the first place. And you can accept it or not any way you choose. And for you, this may be an excursion, you know, across the line.
What about the person that wants to listen? I genuinely feel that I want to listen.
Well, if you listen and try to do something, you get kicked out of your church. See, that's the way your people are.
Well, we do make changes.
His name was Ernie Chambers, and his barbershop would become a stage, a sanctuary, and a tribunal. In this video, we will be digging into the enigmatic life and adventures of this brilliant black man known as the Radical Barber. We will be tracing his early years down to his role in the summer of 1966, his emergence as a radical voice, and the enduring significance of his remarkable works. Before we continue on this bright piece of interest, don't forget to support our works by hitting on the thumbs up button in front of you. Share video with friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and subscribe to stay tuned into the channel if you're yet to. Now let's dive in.
I went to an almost all-white school in those days, believe it or not. There was a handful of black children in that school. It was Lothrop Elementary School. My parents would never have taught me or allowed me to use derogatory names to call other children. And when I went to school, I was naturally expecting to be taught things that I didn't know. One day the teacher had this storybook, and it was called Little Black Sambo. And the term I hadn't heard, but it didn't sound good to me. When she would read, the child's name was Sambo. The mother's name was Mumbo. The father's name was Jumbo. And these were the kind of things that seemed like they were designed to make fun of the way black people are expected to talk. She'd read a bit, then when she held up the book so we could see the picture, there was a caricature of a black child. The face was like, as I remember it, a blob with 1,000 little sprigs of hair going every which way, ribbons on it, big red gash for a mouth, eyes like saucers with dots on them, and garish, outlandish clothing that I thought maybe a clown would wear in the circus. And the little white kids, as children will do when they see something funny, laughed. And when they laughed, they looked at me. Being the only black face in the room, to them, I became Little Black Sambo. And I sat in this wooden desk, and I got a position that I could hold. And maybe what kicked in for me was the survival instinct that little animals have. When you're in danger and you can't protect yourself and you don't know anything else, just be still. And it was the most horrible experience that I can remember. And I don't remember any other thing at that period in my life like I remember that story. I'm 83 years old, and I remember it like it was yesterday.
The story of Ernie Chambers is a study in how one man, working in a humble trade, became a pivotal voice in the struggle for racial justice, community empowerment, and political change. Ernie Chambers was not born into the corridors of power. He fought his way there, barefoot in defiance and brimming with intellect. His life, spanning from 1937 into the 21st century, stands as a parable of America's deepest contradictions. A country that celebrates liberty while policing color, that preaches equality while constructing its denial into law, that decorates its constitution with ideals that still wait to be lived.
A lot of what I do in this legislature is symbolic. It's to show us that one black man can stand against and among all these white people. Don't walk like them, talk like them, dress like them, do anything they do, and yet compel them to knuckle under on issues.
Ernest William Chambers entered the world on July 10, 1937, in Omaha, Nebraska, a city already divided by invisible walls, a neighborhood hemmed in by red lines, overlooked by politicians, and harassed by police. His father was a Baptist minister, his mother a quiet moral force, in a household that balanced religious duty with the weary realism of black life in America. But young Ernie had a temper for injustice. In a city that told him to stay in his place, he learned early that silence was a prison and words were keys. From the pulpit, he had learned the cadence of righteous speech. From the streets, the necessity of skepticism. He would attend Omaha Technical High School, graduating in 1955 from an environment where white teachers did often doubt the intellectual potential of black students. Yet Chambers excelled. He had earned a scholarship to Creighton University, a Jesuit institution of privilege that tolerated rather than embraced its handful of black students. There, Chambers studied, and by 1959, he had earned a history degree from Creighton University, one of the few black students to do so. Yet even in academia, Chambers found hypocrisy. Catholic institutions spoke of morality while turning a blind eye to racial inequality. It was here that his skepticism of religion began to simmer, not as atheism at first, but as protest against a pious system that preached equality while practicing exclusion. Creighton's theology, he would later say, taught him as much about hypocrisy as holiness. He watched white priests preach humility while refusing to dine with black students. He saw religion, in its institutional form, as an accomplice of segregation. That disillusionment would later sharpen his secular humanism and his lifelong critique of organized faith's complicity in racial oppression. It was at Creighton that Chambers began to understand something profound. In America, truth must often disguise itself as confrontation. After college, Chambers took a job at the Omaha post office, where black workers were habitually demeaned by white supervisors. He objected, loudly, eloquently, and was fired. The lesson was brutal but clarifying. Truth in America had consequences, especially when voiced by a black man who refused to bend. However, this was his first lesson in the cost of dignity, and it was well taken. Unemployed but unbowed, Chambers turned to a trade he could control. He rented a chair at Goodwin's Spencer Street Barbershop, a small weather-beaten shop in North Omaha. From that small, unassuming space, he built something remarkable. The barbershop would before long become a community parliament, a sanctuary for debate, laughter, and radical thought. Haircuts cost a few dollars. The conversations were priceless. In that barbershop, Chambers found his pulpit. He wasn't just trimming hair now, he was holding court. Every haircut was a political seminar. Every customer, a witness to his awakening. His razor cut hair, but his tongue cut hypocrisy. In a country still choking under the shadow of Jim Crow, this shop had become a sanctuary of self-respect and radical thought. Here, Chambers sharpened his philosophy. He spoke of police brutality, of housing discrimination, of the illusion of integration that left black Americans still stranded on the margins. In this shop, he hosted community members, activists, young people, elders, and others who felt marginalized. This shop became a gathering place and an incubator for discussion. As one account puts it, it gave Ernie a platform to grow. To appreciate Chambers, one must see his barbering not as a sideline, but a foundational part of his public life. It was in that chair that he developed the rhetorical skills, the community relations, and the trust of his neighbors. He understood that change begins with the everyday, listening, conversation, root issues, and not just grand speeches. He read voraciously Sartre, Baldwin, Du Bois, and he listened to the pulse of the street. Each day, men filed in weary from labor and left lighter, not just in hair, but in heart. At this juncture, white Omahas feared Mr. Chambers, while black Omahas revered him. Going forward, by the 1960s, North Omaha and many urban black communities across America were under pressure. Housing discrimination, police harassment, job inequality, and a rising sense of impatience with mere accommodation. Into this context stepped Chambers. By the year 1966, America itself was in the throes of reckoning. The summer of 1966 marked a violent rupture. From Watts to Detroit, black communities rose against centuries of sanctioned indignity. Omaha was no exception. It too exploded. That year, Omaha erupted in a series of disturbances. In July and early August, confrontations between black youth and police, and by extension local power structures, escalated, requiring the Nebraska National Guard to be called to restore order. Police brutality, housing segregation, and joblessness had pushed North Omaha to the brink. Riots, what the establishment called riots and Chambers called responses, rippled through North Omaha that summer. In the fuming chaos, one figure stood out, Ernie Chambers. The barber with the fierce eyes and uncompromising tongue had emerged timely as the community's de facto spokesman. He met with Omaha's mayor, A.V. Sorensen, demanding answers and dignity. He gathered grievances, organized meetings, and refused the patronizing tones of city officials who spoke of law and order while ignoring justice. That same year, Chambers appeared in the documentary A Time for Burning. Intended as a soft exploration of race relations, the film accidentally became one of the most piercing indictments of white liberalism ever recorded and was later nominated for an Oscar award. In it, a well-meaning Lutheran pastor tries to arrange interracial dialogues between his white congregation and North Omaha's black residents. When he walks into Chambers' barbershop, the young barber listens, then delivers one of the most unforgettable lines in civil rights history. As far as we're concerned, your Jesus is contaminated.
You couldn't walk around and talk to people, stand up in your pulpit on Sunday and preach nice little songs and say, now we're going to give thanks to the Lord for he is good and old Jesus be among us. As far as we're concerned, your Jesus is contaminated, just like everything else you tried to force upon us is contaminated.
Well,
so you can have him. And here's what I'll say, I wish you would follow Jesus like we followed him. Because if you did that, then we'd be in charge tomorrow. I think the problem is so bad that we can have no understanding at all.
The air seemed to stop. The pastor blinks, stunned. Chambers had explained that white Christianity's history of slavery, segregation, and silence has made it morally bankrupt. His words were not meant to insult, but to awaken. Yet white America saw in Chambers not a prophet, but a provocation. The New York Times reviewed the film. Clergy across the Midwest condemned him. But in North Omaha, he became a legend. The barber who dared to speak the truth so raw that even faith flinched. Ernie Chambers first ran for office in 1968, going after a seat on the Omaha Public Schools Board and losing. In 1969, he lost a bid for the Omaha City Council. Mr. Chambers worked as a school counselor at Tech High School and taught black history classes there before getting fired in 1970. By 1971, Chambers transformed his community voice into electoral power. He ran for the Nebraska legislature. No major party backed him. No lobby financed him. His campaign slogan was simple: the system must answer to the streets. Against long odds, he won, becoming the only black member of Nebraska's unicameral legislature, representing Omaha's predominantly black District 11, and one of the few in the nation to rise directly from working-class activism.
Some communities in Nebraska which are out of touch with the trends of this modern society, this modern world. And these particular communities have to be dragged, even if it's kicking and screaming, into the 20th century.
In a legislature that was overwhelmingly white, conservative, and male, the barber from North Omaha cut an unforgettable figure. He entered the state capitol in Lincoln wearing blue jeans, t-shirts, and sandals. His hair was natural, his posture unbending. To white legislators, he was a provocation. To his constituents, a revelation.
And when I came down there, they were so terrified of me that they drilled holes in that beautiful wood in the ceiling of the chamber and installed these television cameras so they could keep an eye on me, and brought the state troopers into the chamber because they thought I came down here to do physical battle.
On entering the legislature, Chambers refused to conform. He had immediately challenged the rituals of power, refusing to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, declaring that a nation built on slavery had not earned his allegiance, that a flag that had never protected black lives was no object of devotion.
When this flag represents liberty and justice for all,
he said,
then I will stand.
He also refused to wear a suit, saying dignity did not depend on fabric, and he refused to let injustice slip by unchallenged. He insisted on plain language in bills, fought for open meetings, and exposed hypocrisy with surgical sarcasm.
So I had to mess with other people's bills, I had to offer amendments, I had to fight against bills that I did not like, and I had to force them to respect me for what I knew.
Over the decade, he became Nebraska's most feared and respected voice of conscience. Chambers wielded the legislative floor like a courtroom, using filibusters as protest, words as weapons. He was brilliant, fiery, and unyielding.
On this proposed rule change and on other things this session, we're going to fight like scorpions in a bottle. I promise you that. I own you. You are my legislature. I feel like a duke or an earl or whoever is in charge of a fiefdom. What will you do if the bill goes back to the committee? You'll wind up making all this noise like the mountain, and then it will bring forth a mouse. You cannot even pass a budget. You put the rules in place that I voted against, and now you won't follow your rules. And I told you that the day you adopted them. Your rules would bite you before they bite me. And the most important thing that you do as a legislature is to build a budget, and you won't even pass it on the day that the rules you all adopted say you should pass it.
He filibustered racist bills, forced debates on poverty, and introduced legislation to abolish corporal punishment in schools. He championed prison reform, gender equality in pensions, district-based elections that allowed black communities to elect their own local representatives, and above all, the abolition of the death penalty, which he saw as the modern continuation of America's ritual of racial violence. In 1979, he returned to Creighton to finish his law degree, graduating as a Juris Doctor, an act not of ambition, but of armament.
They make laws to keep us out, so I'll learn their laws to fight back.
By decade's end, he had achieved what no one thought possible. A working-class black barber had become the moral center of a state legislature in one of the whitest regions of the country. The 1980s brought new battles. The world outside Nebraska was shifting. Reagan's America glorified wealth and law and order while starving social programs and criminalizing black poverty. Chambers stood as the unrepentant countercurrent. That year, 1980, he had introduced a resolution calling for Nebraska to divest from companies doing business with apartheid South Africa, the first such initiative in the United States. While Washington coddled Pretoria, a lone black senator from Omaha forced his white colleagues to reckon with the global kinship of oppression. Upon discovering that the University of Nebraska held several hundred gold Krugerrands as an investment, Chambers introduced a non-binding resolution calling for reinvestment of state pension funds that had been invested directly or indirectly in South Africa. The resolution argued that apartheid was contrary to Nebraska's principles of human rights and legal equality. Nebraska's divestment caused little immediate change in business practices. David Packard of Hewlett-Packard said, "I'd rather lose business in Nebraska than with South Africa." But other state governments, and eventually the federal government, followed Nebraska's example, contributing to the end of apartheid. Chambers spearheaded a stronger 1984 law mandating divestment, resulting in Nebraska's public employee pension funds divesting $14.6 million in stocks issued by companies that did business with South Africa. Archbishop Desmond Tutu later visited Lincoln, where he remarked that Nebraska had helped to end apartheid. The state government conspicuously did not invite Chambers to Tutu's speaking event. Chambers would also become known for his Marsh versus Chambers lawsuit, which was filed in the same year, 1980, attempting to end the legislature's practice of beginning its session with a prayer offered by a state-supported chaplain, arguing that it was unconstitutional under the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. The district court held that the prayer did not violate the Constitution, but that state support for the chaplain did. The Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals held that both practices violated the Constitution, but in Marsh versus Chambers, 1983, the Supreme Court held by a 6-3 vote that both practices were constitutional because of the United States' unique history. Although the Supreme Court ruled against him, the case had cemented Chambers' reputation as a defender of the wall between church and state, and as a man who refused to allow public piety to obscure moral failure. Chambers' opponents tried to isolate him. He was often the single dissenting vote, but isolation only sharpened his resolve. He once told a reporter,
"They can outvote me, but they can't outthink me."
By the 1990s, his influence had grown legendary. He championed LGBT rights before it was politically safe, co-sponsoring a 1993 bill to prohibit job discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. He defended welfare programs and fought the death penalty year after year, introducing abolition bills session after session, sometimes alone. But as his victories mounted, so did resentment. In the year 2000, Nebraska voters passed term limits that capped service to 2 consecutive terms. Many admitted it was designed specifically to end Chambers' decades-long tenure. Chambers smiled.
They can't silence the people of North Omaha,
he said.
They can only delay them.
When term limits forced him out in 2008, after nearly 40 years of service, Chambers didn't fade. He taught, mentored activists, and he continued to cut hair in the same community that had made him. In 2012, the voters brought him back. He reclaimed his seat in the legislature, older but unsoftened. In 2015, he achieved the victory that had haunted his career. Nebraska voted to abolish the death penalty, becoming the first conservative state in the modern era to do so. It was Chambers' crowning legislative triumph. For decades, he had called capital punishment the legal residue of ***ing. His words finally carried the day. The joy was brief. The following year, the governor pushed through a referendum to reinstate it. Yet even in defeat, Chambers' moral victory endured. He had forced one of America's most conservative states to confront its conscience, and for a fleeting moment to choose mercy. He never courted comfort. He filed bold lawsuits, including the famous 2007 suit against God, where he protested the hypocrisy of those who invoke divine will in politics while denying people justice, the court said.
You can't sue God. You can't locate him.
If you can't locate him, then stop pretending he's running this state.
The judge dismissed it, but Chambers had made his point. Religion could not be both shield and sword in a secular state. When his final term ended in January 2021, Ernie Chambers had served 46 years in the Nebraska legislature, the longest in its history. He left with no riches, no monuments, and no apologies. Going forward, to call Ernie Chambers radical is to misunderstand him. He was not radical in the sense of destruction, but in the truest sense of the word, radix, root. He sought the root of injustice, and once he found it, he refused to trim around it politely. His radicalism was not hatred, but clarity. In a society built on white fragility and the moral evasions of power, clarity itself was revolutionary. He saw America's racial struggle not as a matter of policy, but of conscience.
I don't hate white people,
he said.
I hate white supremacy. And they are not the same thing.
Chambers' life forces us to reconsider what democracy means when one man of conscience can do more for justice than entire parties combined. He proved that politics without integrity is theater, and that dignity can exist even in defeat. But perhaps the most striking truth about Ernie Chambers is that he never left the barbershop. Even as a legislator, he remained accessible. Constituents could walk into his small, cluttered office in jeans and speak their minds. He called them my bosses. He cut hair until age and law prevented him, saying the act kept him grounded. His barbershop was America in miniature, a space of struggle, truth, and community. It was where he learned that leadership begins with listening. Ernest Chambers, aka Ernie, was, in fact, just the man America couldn't absorb. Ernie belongs to a lineage of uncompromising black thinkers, Frederick Douglass, Malcolm X, James Baldwin, each of whom forced America to face its own lies. But Chambers is unique in that he fought from within the system without being consumed by it. He entered politics as an act of resistance, not ambition. He never wore the mask of civility that white power demanded. When told that his casual dress demeaned the legislature, he replied,
Clothes don't make character. If they did, the penitentiary would be full of saints.
White Nebraska alternately ignored him and sought to silence him. But year after year, voters in North Omaha re-elected him, not because he brought pork barrel projects, but because he brought respect. In him, they saw proof that one could be poor, black, and fearless in the face of white supremacy. Chambers' story is not just about a man. It is about a strategy of survival in a country that prefers silence to truth. It is about transforming anger into articulation, despair into defiance, and oppression into oratory. His words cut through the polite lies of liberalism and the cruelty of conservatism alike. He made both sides uncomfortable, And that perhaps was his greatest service. Even now, in the 2020s, long after his departure from office, Ernie Chambers remains a living reminder that freedom is not granted by those who hold power. It is wrested by those who speak truth. He lives still in Omaha, modestly, his legacy carried not by monuments, but by memory. His barbershop is gone, but its spirit persists in every grassroots gathering where truth is spoken without permission. Ernie Chambers once said,
"Justice is not a favor, it is a right. And a right is something you must demand, not request."
That sentence captures the essence of his life, a half-century of moral insistence in a country allergic to self-critique. In 2004, Chambers was honored by the Omaha Housing Authority with the renaming of the historic Strelo Terrace Apartments as the Ernie Chambers Court. Today, there are few monuments or honors extended to Mr. Chambers. There has been talk about establishing an Ernie Chambers Museum at 4022 Florence Boulevard in the Saratoga Beltline Historic District, but they haven't been enacted yet. Maybe in the future, Omaha will recognize the massive impact Ernie has had on the city, the state, and the nation by recognizing him with a street, park, or better, sustainable policy and social change to stop white supremacy. In closing, the radical barber from North Omaha may never appear in mainstream history books beside Lincoln or Jefferson today, but in the quiet rebellion of his barbershop, in the unrelenting courage of his voice, Ernie Chambers carved out a place more enduring than marble. Ernie Chambers' life is not a tale of victory over racism, for that battle remains unfinished, but of unyielding resistance within it. He proved that one black man, rooted in community and fearless in speech, could hold a mirror to an entire state and make it squirm with self-recognition. He did not seek comfort, he sought truth. He did not crave applause, he demanded justice. And today, when activists rise against oppression, when students quote Malcolm X, when pastors preach about integrity, Ernie Chambers stands in the background of that history, the radical barber who refused to bow. He stands among the rare few who have not only seen America's flaws clearly, but refused to let them stand unchallenged. He was, and remains, America's most ungovernable conscience, the man who turned a pair of clippers and a barbershop into instruments of revolution. And that brings us to the very end of yet another video segment. If the story of this video has been revelatory, then kindly support our works by hitting the thumb button before you. Share video with friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and subscribe to stay tuned in to our channel so you miss out on any updates in the future. It's quite a delight having you on this journey with us. Thank you for always watching. See you in the next one.